Hi, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Dimos Gerokitos. You might know me from the Airlock Academy, and here with me is Mark Bütikover, who is one of the product managers of the Airlock IAM. And while I will be presenting the new features of the Airlock IAM 7.1, he will be handling the chat or the questions. So if you have any questions at any time, just ask them. Don't wait until I'm finished with talking, because he will be online the whole time and answering the questions. So this EM release has been last week, 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, and we focused on some really interesting features here. Of course, as always, you can find all the features in the release notes, where you see everything we included in this release. But here for today, we picked out those issues here. The reporting has changed or has been adapted. Then we will have a look at flows, REST API, and the single page application. We'll have a look at PSD2, which was introduced the last few months in the pre-releases, which were delivered the last few months. Then we will have a look at some changes within the Docker image, which we done, and some security changes we did. First of all, let's talk about the reporting, because I think this will have quite a big impact on how you run your EM or how you analyze your EM. And you might know that up to now it was like this, that your EM was producing local log files where it was creating the log files, which were quite text-based. So you had files on the system, which you then could export to, let's say, a SIEM or whatever you wanted to export them to, or you could analyze them on the file system itself. And what we did now is we created a second file type. Instead of just writing down the logs as text-based, we are writing down logs which are also in a JSON structure. So everything was split up in type values, which allows you to export this JSON file into your own SIEM by a data collector or log agent, and then analyze there the logs we are producing. The nice about this solution is that we have still the old logs there. So if you build up anything around those logs, you can still continue to work with them. And additionally, you can use a new mechanism, which is based on this JSON. The second nice thing, and this is really fantastic, because now you can use our forwarder to forward the logs into an Elasticsearch database, which will be external. We have some index templates which you can use, and dashboards which you can use. And then you can analyze the logs on the Elasticsearch database. And of course, for those who already knew the web application firewall, the web application firewall also logs into Elasticsearch database, so you can make your WAF sending the logs to the Elasticsearch database, and then you have one system with all the logs. And this is the first presentation I would like to make. So in here we have a reporting which we are using internally, and on the left side you can see the Discover, where you can have a look at the log as you're used to. And of course, you see immediately that they are now nicely structured, highlighted, so you can see everything with just one glance. But much more impressive on first glance, of course, are the dashboards. So we included 3 dashboards. You can make your own dashboards as is usual in Kibana. And as I mentioned before, if the WAF logs on the same machine, you can have your WAF dashboards on the same machine also, and then analyze both within the same Discover. I wanted to have a look at those dashboards. I have to add that the logs created in the JSON are mainly the part talking about the login. So you will see how the login went. So you see if it's a success or a failure. You can see what users have logged in. You can see what channel they used. So was it the REST channel? Was it the default login? Was it an SSO or OAuth2? You can see what factor was used when the logins happened, on what host, which environment, instances, and so on and so on. Here in this case, you can see that we are obviously on a machine where the logs from Docker are arriving. This is why the hosts have those names. And you can also see we have 5 Docker instances running, and everything is logging into here, and we have centralized place where everything can be analyzed. So there's a detailed log dashboard where you see the information about the sessions and the requests, what modules were targeted by requests, which hosts again, which environment, which instance, and the third view is the factor usage. So you can see what authentication factor was used, mostly password, and then split up into different authentication factors. Inside those factors, you can see which token really was used, and everything nicely split up. As always, when using Kibana, you can create your own visuals, and as I said, you can even create your own dashboard. So you will see here that we have our own dashboard underneath the 3 standard dashboards where we can have our information, which is important in our case to analyze. Good. Then there's another thing. We added the standard out. So this JSON file will be pushed into standard out, which means Docker can access this log file, and you can use this to analyze when you're running it in a Docker environment. So there's a lot of possibilities open up here. I'm really interested to see what people are going to make out of it, especially the possibility to combine Airlock IAM and WAF logs on the same machine will be quite interesting to be able to analyze faster things within an environment. Then the other big step which was done was within the flows, the REST API and the single page application. As you might know, we started up with a simple web application. So when you called the Airlock IAM login app, there was an HTML page delivered. So you call /auth/login. The HTML page was delivered, and the user was then working there on this page with the HTML, which was delivered by our web application. Since Airlock IAM 7.1, we started to include a REST interface, which is also on the same module. And since then, we started to improve this REST interface, and there's always new functionality coming up, so you can do more and more by using this REST interface. So you can create your own native app accessing Airlock IAM through this REST interface, and so your users can use this REST interface to authenticate them. Within the native app, JSON will be then delivered. And this is where the new single page application steps in. So when you call the web interface, you will be sent an HTML including lots of JavaScript, which then will call itself again the REST interface, which gives you a lot of flexibility. We created something called flows, which allows you to set different steps one after the other in a row, which you can decide what happens when and why it happens, and therefore you can create your own flows. And of course, the whole thing is responsive, so you can have it running either on a desktop or in a mobile environment. So on first glance, actually, it doesn't look very spectacular. It just looks a little bit slightly different than before. Just give me a second to call it here. So when I start the /auth/login, I will be redirected to a single page application, which then builds it up more or less looks the same as it looked before, which was of course the goal. The nice thing about this is the look and feel can be created using an SDK. So you can give your graphics department or whoever builds up the look and feel of your web page this SDK. And without having an EM instance themselves or having access to the EM instance, then they can create the look of this new web page. Generate the files needed, and then you'll import them into the Airlock IAM where you're running with. Okay, then password reset was added. This one of the features which wasn't included in the last version. So password reset is now possible using the flow, the REST flow. And what's also very interesting, you can decide which flow to take depending on which target application or which forward location you're going to. So depending if you're going to e-banking, online shop, or insurance, whatever is behind your EM, there will be a different flow selected and a different action will be done or used by the user. And last but not least, you have the role-based selection, where you can decide within a flow based on the roles the user has if it goes one way or the other. Plus, it's possible to have multiple steps, multiple self-registrations. So depending on what way a user goes, you will have one self-registration way or the other self-registration way, and the terms of services can be included. Talking about the self-registration, I would like to show you the possibility of the flow. So let's say I would like to sign up. This page gets created. I have to present a username, an email address, my first name, my last name, where I'm from, and my birthday. And you will soon find out that I will turn 18 in a few days. No, I will be born in a few days. Sorry, the other way around. Everything was provided here. I have the terms of services, which now is just a fill-up screen, and then I can accept the whole thing. I will be sent a security code to the email address I provided. Of course, we set up the dummy email forwarder, so I don't need a real email address. Type in the code, type in the password. And now I'm registered and I'm able to log in. Sorry, this was with the new credentials I just created. Of course, you can use any kind of information or any further steps you want to do, whatever you want to do. So to show you the possibilities with the flow-based REST API, I will change the configuration. So I will go to the login app, go to the self-service settings, user self-registration settings, REST API configuration, of course, user self-service settings, user self-registration, and here you can see what is the default flow and what I mentioned before, the possibility to add more flows. So you have different user registrations, and in here I will change the user data registration step. Instead of having all context data in one step, I will create two parts. So the first part is this one, and the second part is this one. And if you have a look at the second part, you will see that here we just included the username and the email address. And if I activate this, self-rec 2, then you will see that without changing anything in the GUI, so without having to provide new JSPs or whatever, I can go to the self-registration, and now the new just created form already is created automatically, and I don't have to do anything by creating a new web page. Okay, and I could go on, and you would see the terms of services, and then on the second page you will have the here the terms of services, and then the rest of the user data will follow. Another thing we changed within the flow is the possibility to jump within different steps. So let's say we have a flow like this. We have a first factor. A user can then select a second factor. So it can decide to go one way or the other way. And after the decision is made, it's now possible to jump to a different step. This can be at any point. It doesn't have to be on the same level. You can actually really jump to the first factor back again and use the information you already got. It will have all the flags, everything which is set there will be saved. And you can really create different workflows, different jump steps, and be quite dynamic by doing by setting everything up and having different ways a user can experience their login. Okay, then as I mentioned during the during the last year, we had some pre-releases done because PSD2 was pushing, and this is now included, of course, in the full version also. So PSD2, for those who don't know what it means, is that the user, banking users can use a third-party provider software, so they don't have to use their own banking app, so or they can use their own software or software of a third-party provider, and those third-party providers have to be able to make calls on the bank. And therefore, those calls have to be verified. And what we are doing is, if a third-party provider software tries to access the account information or do payment on behalf of a user, the Airlock API gateway will step in, have a look if those calls are allowed, if those exist, if the TPP is allowed, if he has a certificate which is valid. You can even have IAM behind to verify the information, to extract roles out of those certificates, and so on and so on. And on the other hand, if the user needs to verify a payment, we can still use the strong customer authentication or consent management, where user verifies that the payment has to be done, where the user will still log in classically via WAF and IAM, and then give the OK to the transaction. Things included are access control for bank PSD2 services, so not everyone can just access those services. The HTTP requests, signature verification, strong customer authentication, as I mentioned, the verification of TPP certificates, which are created by a certification authority, an official certification authority. We verify that those certificates are still valid and issued by the correct certification authority. You can extract information out of those TPP certificates like roles. And it's also possible for those TPPs to register on the system on the fly. So even if the bank never had to do any work with this TPP software, the software is able to register since it has a official certificate where it's verified that this TPP is an official TPP who can access those information. One of the big changes in the European banking, and which has a lot of impact around and in Switzerland, of course. Then let's move on to Docker. One of the most important things for the guys running Docker container is that containers getting smaller. So if you have multiple containers on the same system, you will see a much significant size reduction on side of the EM. Another thing which we included for Docker, but you can also use it for normal installations, is the health check. So under localhost / health, you can see if the EM is up and running. And as always with Docker, you can get this from the Docker.com registry. So you can register with us. And this is new, so you can register with us and drag the Docker image from our registry. And I want to show you how this works or what steps are included. So normally I would have to log in again since I've run into timeout. Just give me a second. Normally I would create a directory. Let me increase the size of the screen or of the output so you can see it better. Then in the next step, well, you would run Docker on the system. I need to copy the information. So here we are. Yeah, I would log in into Docker. And what I would do if I haven't already done it is getting the latest Airlock IAM. It's flagged as latest is quite right now is version 7.1, of course, which is the latest version. If a new version would have come out, you would have pulled down the newest version. So in this case, we're up to date. You can then inspect and see if everything was downloaded correctly. You will see that we have different hashes for the different versions, and here you can see that 7.1, which came out last week, is of course the latest 7.1, and in parallel, if you're running a 7.0 for one installation still, you can have the latest 7.0 always downloaded. So if ever 7.05 comes out, the 7.0 latest will of course then be updated to this version. And let's have a look what we downloaded during the last few days and weeks. So we have a look at the Docker images. We see that we downloaded the latest 7.1, latest 7.0, and we have, of course, as in many Docker installations, to the proof of concept, the Hello World image, which is a typical test which you can run to see if everything is set up properly. What I now could do is running the CLI by using Docker run. I would start the EM and see if everything is working. But since I'm already running as EM on this machine, I will do something different. I will run an image where I tell the system that I just want to start the admin app. I tell the system that I want to use a different port and tell it what software to use. And I use the different port, of course, because I'm already running Airlock IAM. And of course, now where I had to copy and paste those things, it took me a while to set everything up, but if you have everything scripted, you can imagine that everything would be quite faster. The download takes usually, depending on your internet connection, takes a few minutes until everything is set up and run. And of course, when EAM is starting, this also takes a few minutes. So after a while, I should be able to connect to this EAM, which is already started. And you've seen my effort was quite low, so setting up EAM using Docker is very, very simple. Everything is explained in the online help, and even I can do it under stress conditions, so you should be also able to do it at home in a lab quite easily. Okay, then moving on to the next thing, we talked about the Docker. We did some security changes. One of the bigger changes is that you might know that the WAF has an API gateway functionality where it can verify open API specifications. And this is what we've done. We've created for the Airlock IAM REST interface open API specifications or Swagger files. They were called Swagger files. And you can import them into your mapping. There is also a description in the manual what you can do. Of course, you can have a separate mapping for the REST interface and a separate mapping for the classical view. And then the WAF will check against this open API file and verify that all the requests you're sending are inside this specification, and therefore you can verify that only valid requests are sent to the EM. It's like an additional whitelisting. The second thing is that we added CSP headers onto the EM, so the security of the EM application is on a higher level now. The browser can verify that everything runs properly and smoothly. I've seen that I've almost used up my 30 minutes, so I would like to wrap up by pointing out that we're having in February, 19th of February, update training, which you can find on the Airlock Academy webpage, where we will show you the newest features. We will work with them. We will show you this, the SPA and the REST flows to see how those works. And if you would like to have any theme talked about, just tell it to us. We can always make 1 or 2 hours free so that we can have a look at anything, any feature you would like to have a look at. The other thing is about this webinar. There's the Taxon Ergon CH/webinars page where all the webinars we are doing are listed. Right now, there's quite a few on the next few days. Today in the afternoon will be the WAF webinar, or tomorrow morning. And on Thursday, I think, yeah, in 2 days will be the EM webinar in German, the same thing I just did today in English. And after the webinars have been released, you will be able to have a look at older webinars, at the slides I just presented, and of course a record of this webinar. So you can have, if a friend missed the webinar, you can send him the link and you can have a look at it on YouTube. Okay, I'm almost closing down to those 30 minutes, so I would like to wrap it up. Thanks for your attention. I saw that Mark was typing quite a lot. If you have any more questions, just continue to ask. We will stay here until we see that people are dropping out of the webinar. From this side, I will stop the talking and continue on writing. If you have any other question, you know how to find us via the support. Yeah, thank you very much and have a nice day.